it's streaming. Guess I'll just keep this right here then. I guess whenever you're ready. Can you see the screen over there fine?
Yeah.
All right. Do you know what you're going to say?
It's, the usual thing.
All right. Go right ahead then. Whenever you're ready.
Hello, you are listening to Trump Republic Radio. It is March 18th, 2018. I'm your host, Enzo Quesada, and as always, I'm joined by my co-host, Bobby Hester.
Hello, everyone.
And this week is the 1-year anniversary of doing Trump Public Radio. Hard to believe a year's gone by now, Bobby, but I haven't missed a single Sunday since starting the show, and we made it.
And to celebrate our 1-year anniversary, for those of you who are watching on YouTube or watching later on YouTube, the video version, you can see that we have a cake that we have decided to get for ourselves for this special anniversary episode. And if you're just listening, I suggest that you go back and then watch the actual video so you can see the cake, or go onto our Gab account. We have a picture of the cake up there in case you're wondering what it looks like. But for those of you who can see it, I'm not going to be able to tilt it too much. But it says happy birthday, happy anniversary, hashtag MAGA, with a little one candle. So I thought it would be cool if we could take this little one candle and blow it out together, Enzo.
Okay.
We don't have to sing a song. Maybe we'll just count down. So, I don't know.
Okay, 3, 2, 1, blow.
Yeah, look at the little smoke ring it's got.
Yeah.
Ain't that really cool? All right, well, we've got cake, so we might be a little munching on that during the episode. But, we shouldn't wait and get ourselves too distracted here. We should probably get started with the episode.
Yeah, there's a lot of stuff that happened this week, especially in terms of people leaving the White House. But the first shakeup that we want to get into is actually in regards to someone who used to be an employee of the federal government.
That's right. So former FBI Deputy Director Andrew McCabe has been fired by Attorney General Jeff Sessions. The announcement came late on Friday night, just hours before he could officially retire with full benefits. FBI ethics officials had recommended his firing just 1 day prior. Sessions said that McCabe, quote, lacked candor, including under oath, on multiple occasions. All FBI employees know that lacking candor under oath results in dismissal. McCabe released a statement after his dismissal, saying that he was, quote, being singled out and treated this way because of the role he played, the actions he took, and the events he witnessed in the aftermath of the firing of James Comey. He also called his firing a way for Trump to impede the Mueller investigation.
I don't exactly see how it hasn't stopped, but I don't know. I'm glad that he's not getting his pension, although McCabe is a rich individual, and his wife makes most of the money.
Isn't his family worth like $5 million or something like that?
More like 20
Almost
million.
like 20? Wow, that's a lot more than I thought.
But, yeah, McCabe, he was up to a lot of bad stuff. He didn't show any semblance of partiality in his dealings with the Mueller probe, and that was shown through the Peter Strzok, Lisa Page text very well. And, it's good that he's gone.
Yeah, I'm very, very glad that he's gone. He's one of those people that we thought he was going to get fired for a long time. Trump even had a tweet several months back, about 3 months back exactly, when he was saying, McCabe's set to retire in 90 days. Will he receive his pension or something like that? So quite literally almost waited till the very last minute to fire him. And what's really unfortunate is there's been a couple of House Democrats, actually, that have said that they're willing to hire him for 2 days just so he can extend his career by 2 days in order to receive his pension. But I don't think that's gone anywhere, and I doubt that the House Ethics Committee is going to be allowing that to happen.
Yeah. Continuing on from there, I mentioned Peter Strzok. The next story we have also is in regards to Peter Strzok.
Yeah, it turns out that that Peter Strzok had a personal relationship with the judge in the Michael Flynn case. Newly discovered text messages reveal that the judge who oversaw the case against Michael Flynn, Judge Rudolph Contreras, had a personal relationship with former FBI agents Peter Strzok and Lisa Page, who were fired from Mueller's investigation. The messages were originally kept hidden from Congress. Quote, "Rudy is on the FISA court," Page excitedly texted Strzok on July 25, 2016. "Did you know that? Just appointed 2 months ago," she said. "I did," Strzok replied. "I need to get together with him." Later on in the text, Strzok texted Page, redacted, because apparently they did redact the name here, redacted, suggested a social setting with others could probably be better than a one-on-one meeting. "I'm sorry, I'm just going to have to invite you to that cocktail party." So this shows that they actually did try to set up with a meeting with him without having to arise any suspicion. So they knew each other, they wanted to meet with each other, and it's no question why Contreras has since recused himself from the case after he made the decision against Flynn the first time.
Yeah. So, the people doing bad things also know the other people doing bad things. It's funny how that works.
What a coincidence there, right?
The next thing that we have here to talk about is the House Intel Committee. This week ended their probe into Russia and found that there is no collusion.
Yeah, that's right. So after a year-long investigation, Texas Representative Mike Conaway announced that the House Intelligence Committee had finished its investigation into Russian meddling into the 2016 elections. Quote, "We found no evidence of collusion," Conaway told reporters. The draft report released by Republicans on the committee concludes there was no collusion or coordination between Trump's campaign and Russia. Trump tweeted in all-caps response, saying, quote, "The House Intelligence Committee has, after a 14-month-long in-depth investigation, found no evidence of collusion or coordination between the Trump campaign and Russia to influence the 2016 presidential election." So a lot of people forget that, while the Mueller probe has been going on, the House itself has been investigating Russian collusion or Russia trying to meddle in the elections in some way, shape, or form. But even then, the House's official investigation has found no collusion or coordination between the Trump campaign and Russia. So we've had a lot of information come out about, Russians used this Facebook page that had 16 likes that only like 200 people saw. Oh, they tried to influence the election. This was more focused on the collusion angle the alleged collusion angle between the Trump campaign and Russia, and they've found nothing. And we know that the Mueller investigation, so far, they found nothing. I mean, they're trying to subpoena documents related to Trump's Trump's businesses and tax stuff back into like the 1990s. There's no way that any of that stuff has anything to do with Trump allegedly colluding with Russia or anything like that. So,
it's crazy with this committee ending their, Russia probe. It makes you wonder, why do we need the Mueller probe going any longer? Have they found anything to substantiate that Trump colluded with Russia? Of everything that's been shown so far, nothing to suggest so.
No, and everything that has come out, the closest information or the closest you can even say to it being somehow a collusion angle is like that meeting that Donald Jr. had with that Russian lawyer back in 2016 that lasted for 10 minutes and everyone walked out without actually getting anything done. I mean, besides that, what do you have? Like, oh, Trump sold a property to some Russian billionaire 10 years ago. That's really all they have at this point.
And, from the get-go, the Mueller probe is illegitimate because it didn't set its scope for what it was even going after. Like, this originally was a look into, what was the collusion between the Trump campaign and, Russians to win the election for Donald Trump. Now it's gotten to the point where it's just Russians influenced the election. And somehow we need to look into Trump's business dealings. Like, it's just all over the place. And this is not how you run an investigation.
No, and even then, the entire point of the investigation is to look into alleged collusion between the Trump campaign and Russia. Going back to look at Trump's business dealings in like the 1990s and stuff like that, things that have absolutely nothing to do with the Russian, Trump having ties to Russia or having Russia have influence over him, none of that's there. In fact, the left uses the fact that there have been several indictments out. One of them was someone, two of them were people lying to the FBI. That's their own fault. They were questioned by the FBI, they lied to the FBI, and they got charged for lying to the FBI as part of the probe. That's not evidence of Trump having collusion with Russia, yet the left thinks it is. They say, see, there's already been two or three indictments out there. These people have no idea what they're talking about. And you look
at, well, some of those indictments was in terms of Manafort, which was all stuff that was done prior to him being involved with the Trump campaign to begin with. But you look at all of the indictments we did, it's, a couple weeks ago now, maybe even a month ago now, when we indicted all those Russian foreign nationals. The government has no intention to actually go after any single one of those individuals for prosecution whatsoever. There's no means for them to bring those people to court in the United States. He's just doing it as a little showpiece. It doesn't mean anything. And they haven't shown us anything to give us reason why he needs to continue. So, I don't know. It's been frustrating dealing with this Mueller probe, but hopefully the IG report comes out soon. You thought it was going to happen this week.
A lot of people thought it was going to happen this week. Obviously, it hasn't. It could happen this upcoming week. It could be another month and a half. All we know is that all the sources on the Hill that are talking to people are saying it's going to drop soon. So who knows what that actual definition is? But every single person that has seen the IG report, it's a complete game changer, dude. Like, there's no way that anyone's going to be able to backtrack from this, and it's going to bring a lot of people down once it does drop. So if anything, I think they're probably waiting just for the right time to do it. Because as we've known from these sorts of things, the people, whenever we find stuff out, we're the last people to find stuff out. The public is the last people to find stuff out, especially when it comes to things happening in Washington, D.C. So yeah, I hope that it gets released as soon as possible in terms of the IG report, and I cannot wait for the day to see these people hauled off in the back of a van.
Yeah. Speaking of people released, we might as well go on to the next story we have, and that is Trump got rid of Secretary of State Rex Tillerson this week.
Yes. On Tuesday, President Trump announced on Twitter that he was firing Secretary of State Rex Tillerson, who will actually stay on until March 31st. Along with the announcement, Trump said that he'll be replacing Tillerson with CIA Director Mike Pompeo. Undersecretary of State Steve Goldstein has also been fired, so they both got canned. But upon Tillerson's exit, Deputy Secretary of State John Sullivan will become the acting Secretary of State. And Pompeo's deputy, Gina Haspel, will become the new director of the CIA. She will become the first woman to serve as director of the CIA. And both Pompeo and Haspel will have to face Senate confirmations before they can officially take their new posts. So essentially how this works is, as of the 31st, Tillerson, he is going to be out of there. And Deputy Secretary of State John Sullivan will take over as acting secretary, even though he will not actually be promoted because, obviously, as we said, Mike Pompeo is going to have to do the thing. But Pompeo is still going to have to go through the Senate. So who knows how long that confirmation could take. So you better get used to hearing the name John Sullivan being floated around, because he's going to be able to make a lot of decisions in the meantime. And hey, for all those people that said Trump's a sexist, here he is putting another woman in charge of something. So there you go.
A woman known for torture.
Yeah, what's her nickname, like Mrs. Torture or something like that? Or?
Yeah, she's known for her role in torture instances in Guantanamo Bay.
Uh-huh.
I don't really know how I feel about that. I'm not really enthused about Tillerson leaving and Pompeo coming in. I mean, it's just the same old as far as what foreign policy would be presented to us if, Pompeo gets into power. He supported us going into the Iraq war, and Trump, campaigned throughout the entire time like, oh, Iraq was this big, terrible thing, we shouldn't have went. But then you're putting people that supported us going into this war into your cabinet. Like, it just doesn't give me reason to believe anything good could change. But, I mean, Tillerson wasn't great either. He said a lot of things, especially in regards to Syria and Russia, that we didn't like. So, who knows, maybe Pompeo will change our mind.
I have heard that Pompeo is more in line with Trump's immigration policies. Now, as Secretary of State, that can only go so far.
Yeah,
at least that's what I've heard. But there's really no point in agreeing with someone 100% if you don't have influence in that area of government. So that's one of those things we'll just have to wait and see how it turns out, and who knows, as I said, how long it's going to take the Senate to actually do those votes or vote them in. Who knows, the Democrats could hold that up for months, but it's one of those things that, like I said, we'll just have to wait and see.
Yeah, so going on from there, let's talk about some opioid crisis stuff, Bobby.
So Trump kind of released, or at least teased, the release of his opioid crisis plan. I'll just read it here. The Trump administration is finalizing a plan to combat the opioid crisis that will call for changing mandatory minimums for drug traffickers and include language urging prosecutors to seek the death penalty as an option for drug dealers in fatal opioid overdose cases. The plan is expected to be released in New Hampshire during Trump's trip to the state on Monday, so I guess, that would be tomorrow. And New Hampshire has some of the highest rates of overdose deaths in the country. I think it's second or third behind West Virginia, I believe. I know we did an entire midweek episode over the opioid epidemic. But critics have said that Trump's plan is very similar to plans created by Philippines President Rodrigo Duterte. So I think that's a good thing. I love Rodrigo Duterte. He's a great guy. And I know he has not exactly been light on the words when it comes to talking about what he would want to see done to drug dealers here. And when it comes to Trump's exact policies, a lot of people are concerned, or at least they're asking questions about whether or not, when it says drug dealers and fatal opioid overdose cases, whether or not that means doctors as well, or at least, people in the medical industry. And frankly, I hope so at this point. The quickest way to get people to fall in line is to overtly punish one person. If doctors start seeing that other doctors are being tried and, theoretically might receive the death penalty if you subscribe opioids to someone, knowing that there's a possibility that they might overdose, especially if you're giving them too much of a dose, meaning, the doctor's orders accidentally triggered an overdose, or at least giving opioids to people who are going to abuse them or who have abused them in the past. I can easily see why that would be an option. That's a very good deterrent in terms of getting rid of the opioid epidemic by stopping it. But now, that's just my take on that.
These are increased mandatory minimums for drug traffickers. I don't think that would include prescribers.
And that's the question, is because people are wondering what exactly they mean by that. But that's what I'm saying is I hope it does.
Because overprescription of opioids is a big problem in the country. But I think this is more specifically, like heroin dealers.
It's more specifically designed to go after cartels and stuff like that.
Yeah. So yeah, I have no problem with the mandatory minimums going up on that. As far as the death penalty, I'm not someone that's opposed to the death penalty. I just don't think that it ever gets implemented in any sort of reasonable fashion that makes it a useful tool. People spend decades on death row.
They spend decades on death row. They try to appeal it a million times. They say that the cost to actually the cost to execute someone through all the legal fees and whatnot is higher than it is to just house them in jail for the rest of their life. Which, I'm kind of very torn on the death penalty. Part of me thinks that, we should get rid of it. Part of me thinks that we should be using it even more for even lesser crimes. But, that's one of those things where if I was actually running for office and someone asked me that question, I'd just be like, you know what? If you can get enough people to actually vote to end the death penalty, I'd probably sign on for it. But until then, I'm just going to keep things the way they are.
But, just in the eye for an eye instance, with the opioid crisis, things like fentanyl kills so many goddamn people. It would be, justice for the people that, give these drugs that kill people to have to die themselves. I'm not denying that. I just think that with all the fighting in courts and the money that goes along with it, it's better just send people to jail for life.
But even then, if you're talking about rich billionaires in the medical industry, sending one of those type of people to jail, that they're going to get special treatment. So
yeah,
it's one of those things that even if you try to punish these people, they're never gonna see the same punishment that they should see. But other than that, I'm pretty much in support of that bill.
Yeah, let's go into some stuff on the economy. I get the first thing. And that is Trump wants a phase 2 on the tax cuts. President Trump said Monday he wants a phase 2 of tax cuts on top of the law passed in December. Trump made the statement while the World Series champion Houston Astros were visiting the White House. Along with the team, Texas Representative Kevin Brady and Texas Senators John Cornyn and Ted Cruz were present. Trump asked, "Kevin, are we going for an additional tax cut?" "I understand." The crowd lightly laughed. "Huh. He's the king of those tax cuts, yeah? We're going to do a phase 2. I'm hearing that. You hear that. John and Ted, phase 2. We're actually very serious about that, Kevin, so it's good."
That's about the most, like, Trumpian way to...
Yeah, I tried to read that straight.
Reading a Trump quote straight is probably not the best way to do it, I hate to say.
Yeah, his cadence is hard to articulate.
It is very hard to articulate, especially if you're reading.
Yeah, we don't know what the specifics are for a phase 2 of the tax cuts, but if they want to do more, I mean, be my guest.
I would say the number one thing that needs to be in phase 2 of tax cuts, if they actually have them, and this is the number one most needed thing, making the tax cuts for individuals permanent.
Yeah,
because as
get
part
rid of
of
those
tax
sunsets.
reform, the December law, or the law that was passed in December, the cut for businesses was permanent. The cut for individuals was only like 10 years or so. So that means that, if you don't do anything to make that permanent, taxes for the individuals are going to go up in about a decade. And that's something that we do not want to happen. But that's easily something that I can see them doing in phase 2. Because everyone knows that, like, down the line you're going to have to, like, do edits to tax reform, and that's understood. But, we got a huge victory during phase 1, so a phase 2 can just be the polishing of that.
And now that the original tax bill that we passed has actually, you look at the polling numbers, it's recovered in a big degree. It actually has a majority of Americans favoring the bill passing. Now we can actually get public sentiment towards us starting a phase 2 on this, which should be good. But moving on from there, we want to go into the budget deficit. Currently, the U.S. has the biggest budget deficit it has had since 2012. The U.S. recorded a $215 billion budget deficit in February, its largest in 6 years, as revenue declined. The deficit for the fiscal year that began in October widened to $391 billion.
And this is one of my biggest complaints with the Trump administration is they do not care about spending. Same way that the Obama administration didn't care about spending, Trump administration doesn't care about spending at all. They have, tried to cut spending in different areas in terms of things like fixing the budget, deficit, sort of stuff like that. I mean, the very next story that we're going to talk about can more so illustrate my point, and that is the national debt has reached $21 trillion. The national debt exceeded $21 trillion for the first time on Thursday, a little over 6 months after it first hit $20 trillion back on September 8th. Federal borrowing has been on the rise again since February, passed legislation to suspend the debt ceiling. That move allowed the government to borrow as much as it needs to fund activities approved by Congress. Under the law passed in February, the government will not face any borrowing limit until March 1st, 2019. So that's, just about a year from now. But the national debt grew by more than $500 billion in the 6 weeks since the debt ceiling was lifted on February 9th. So one of the things that you actually need to remember here is when you're having all these fights over raising the debt ceiling, up until that point, your resources via, money-wise, tend to start running thin. And when you start approving budgets and you start raising the debt ceiling, people all of a sudden realize, wait, we can just borrow more as much as we want. They tend to do it kind of all at once, which is, as we saw it go up by $500 billion in 6 weeks after they raised it, is because they try to get all that money right away. So going down the line in terms of the next few months, the amount of money that is being borrowed will start to slowly decline a little bit until, March 1st, 2019, when they will probably, for sure raise it one more time, thus making our debt problem even worse. But
and we're getting to the point where this debt hurts a lot.
Does.
Every new trillion that you add is more painful than the last one that you add. And just considering interest at hand. We can't really sustain this kind of debt level for very much longer whatsoever, but it looks like there's no hope at the moment of any sort of curtailing of this. Nothing as far as what Congress is working on. So it's just going to continue. They're going to continue to kick this down the line. Anything else on that, Bobby, or you want to go on?
I just want to say the last thing is that, to finish off the point that I was making before I started this slide, yeah, this is my biggest problem with the Trump administration, is the fact that they are not doing anything to solve the debt crisis that is the national debt and the deficit. So I would wish that they would do more to do that, but at this point, that's one of those things where I'm very unhappy with the way that the Trump administration and the government has been handling things lately. So I just want to make my point known.
Yeah. Let's move on now to the one story we have on the science section here, and that's related to Elon Musk.
Yeah, so Elon Musk, the CEO of SpaceX, he is promising that we'll have a Mars spaceship ready by 2019. So during his speech at South by Southwest in Austin, Texas last Saturday, SpaceX founder Elon Musk said his company plans to have its first Mars spaceship ready by the first half of 2019. The rocket is intended to send a cargo mission to Mars by 2022 in order to plant the seeds to put a future human colony on the red planet. SpaceX's BFR rocket system is expected to have capabilities for interplanetary travel and be fully reusable. Musk also said that the cost of a flight will be around $5 to $6 million. Hey, $5 to $6 million to fly a thing to Mars and back to reuse this rocket? That's really, really cheap, I think. I don't know about you, but I think that's very, very low.
Yeah, that doesn't seem like a lot.
But they said million. They didn't say billion with the B. They said million with an M. So the one thing that Musk did say is after he said the first half of 2019, he kind of looked at the audience, laughed, and then he said but you guys know that my timetables for things aren't exactly accurate all the time. So it'll probably be later than that. But hey, here's to optimism, right?
I would love to see this 2019.
Thing. So that could be January 1st all the way to what? June 30th? Technically, that would be in the first half. So, I don't know.
Very soon. It's crazy how quickly the technology on space stuff has been moving now that we've been seeing this big emphasis on private space exploration, as seen through what Elon Musk does. Although he does receive a shitload of subsidies. So.
Oh yeah, anyone who's thinking that SpaceX would be where it is right now without taxpayer-funded subsidies is absolutely dead wrong.
Yeah.
And now, when people like to use the whole, especially libertarians like to use the whole, private industry does it better than government. Private industry does run things a lot more efficiently. That is true. They tend to have better timetables, get things done faster, better, stronger. That is true. But the money to pay for it, they would not be able to do it without government subsidies. It just doesn't exist. The money is not there. So yeah, that's one of those things where I'm glad that they're doing it, even though they are being funded by the government. But hey, you know what? If they can do it cheaper than it would cost for the government itself to do it, the money's going to have to be spent somehow to get it done. Might as well do it in the most efficient way possible. So subsidies, yeah.
Yeah. With that said, let's go on to some immigration news. So for the first thing that we want to get into on immigration, we got to talk about some stuff happening here in Texas, of our home state, and that is the courts have upheld most of the Texas Sanctuary Cities bill. Judges on the Fifth Circuit Court of Appeals ruled Tuesday that a majority of Texas's anti-sanctuary city law, SB 4, can remain in effect while the legal battle plays out. The portion that remains on hold is a provision that punishes local officials for, quote, adopting, enforcing, or endorsing policies that specifically prohibit or limit enforcement of immigration laws. Although the court says only the endorsing provision is on hold, not the adopting or enforcing provisions. In August, U.S. District Judge Orlando Garcia halted enforcement of several parts of the bill, including the provision that requires jailing officials to honor including the provision that required jail officials to honor all ICE detainers. So, this is good stuff for this is actually very good stuff. The SB4 bill, we talked about when this was upheld, back in August. I'm surprised it was that long ago now.
Yeah, it seems like it's been not that long.
This is something that we've been having to deal with for a very long time, but now we can finally not have to deal with these shitty sanctuary cities in our state.
And you know what? If we can enforce everything except for the endorsing provision, I'm perfectly fine with that. Because it essentially says that, if...
They're still trying to get that.
Yeah, they are trying to get that. But, if the whole adopting and enforcing, if you can still jail people for enforcing sanctuary city laws, that's one thing. But simply endorsing a sanctuary city law, if that's the only part of this that you can't actually jail people for, but you can get the rest of it online... Yeah. You know what? I'm okay with that for right now until we get this thing all the way through the court. That's perfectly fine with me.
But, in terms of what this does for us as a state, it's great. So, the important thing, which it was at the end of what I was saying, is the honoring all ICE detainers. Mm-hmm. Now, as far as Texas is concerned, and let me know if there's any I'm missing, Austin has sanctuary city status. San Antonio has sanctuary city status. Dallas doesn't anymore, I believe.
Yeah, Dallas had it, but they got rid of it.
Yeah. Other than that, I don't think there's any other sanctuary cities.
I think there was a push to try to get Houston to do it, but I don't think that went anywhere.
Yeah. So
I'm surprised that El Paso isn't. I actually have no idea whether or not El Paso is or at least wants to be a sanctuary city or not. I know Fort Worth, I believe, is not. But every other city that you listed, I think, was.
Yeah, it's funny, though, us personally being people that live between the two big ones, Austin and San Antonio. Austin has especially been the most egregious in terms of how they don't want to comply with federal, immigration laws, where they got that Sheriff Hernandez.
Yeah.
The provision on sending officials that limit immigration laws is pretty much written just for her.
You know what? I love it when people do stuff like that. But I would love to see her in the back of that van as well as everybody else.
Yeah, I believe at some point I saw Sheriff Hernandez had to commented on SB4 being reenacted, and she says, they're not going to make any definitive statements on what they're going to do at the moment.
Which means, we're screwed.
Yeah. But, the ICE detainers thing is terrible because, when illegal aliens commit some crime, say they vandalized or they raped someone, they go to jail. And ICE puts a detainer on these individuals saying, keep this person at the jail until we show up so we can get them, so we can deport them. And what happens in these sanctuary cities is they don't honor these detainers. They get a declined detainer. You can look up declined detainer reports. They used to release them in the administration. Austin would have a ton, usually around.
We would go over them on the show a little bit.
And towards the beginning of the show that we do this a lot, and you'd see like 30, 40 different names every single week. And these are just criminals that they just let out on the streets that they didn't want to hold until ICE gets there. And they say that they do this, to protect the communities by not separating families. But they just let these criminals go back on the streets. It's crazy.
And, there was bad stuff in there. Like, they said what the crimes were. A lot of them were DUIs. There was some aggravated assaults. There was weapons charges. There were sexual assaults. I mean, it had very wide variety of crimes.
Every single week in Austin. And these would all be people that you see that the government, the city government there in Austin just let go. Mm-hmm. And we're not going to deal with that anymore. So I am very happy to have SB4 back.
And, I was going to say the fact that it went through the Fifth Circuit, I don't think there's anything else except for Supreme Court at that point.
Yeah, that's the only thing you could appeal higher to stop it.
So, the Supreme Court would, for sure, I mean, at this point, we know the Supreme Court would side on our side with that. But, it's probably going to go to the Supreme Court. I mean, let's not kid ourselves here, but it's probably going to take a long time before it gets there. There's a lot of other cases that we know are going to be heading to the Supreme Court as well.
Yeah. Let's move on to the next thing, though, and that is Trump toured the border wall prototypes this week. President Trump made his first visit to California on Tuesday in order to personally inspect the border wall prototypes near the U.S.-Mexico border in San Diego. Trump met met with construction crews as well as Border Patrol and other immigration officials. His trip was met with numerous protesters, many of whom held professional signs printed in Spanish. Trump told reporters at the White House he was leaving.
As he was leaving.
As he was leaving, we'll see you at the wall.
I love that video. Trump's like, we'll see you at the wall. But no, it was pretty cool. You know, to see Trump standing there in front of the border wall prototypes.
Oh, yeah, it looked great.
You know, it's his baby. It's his pet little project that he wants to do. Obviously, it's more so than just a pet project, but you understand by what I mean by that. So that was cool to see. And, you know, as much as the protests were when Trump got there, the people coming out in support of him was actually a lot higher, especially in the area that Trump was going to. There was one crowd that was a pro-Trump crowd of at least, I think, a couple thousand people that showed up. People that normally would not be going out publicly in support of Trump in the state of California for fear of many different bad things happening to them. So that was great. Yeah, that's really what I have to say about that.
Yeah. Yeah, it was a great moment seeing him at the wall, and, you know, his decision on which prototypes we're going to use for the wall should be coming shortly. As he's always said, he was going to personally inspect the border wall prototypes before he'd come to his decision.
Right.
Let's go on now to a little report from the Princeton policy advisors on what would happen, though, if we don't get the wall. Mm-hmm. So, according to a report by Princeton policy advisors in New Jersey, illegal border crossings are set to surge up to as much as 70% this year, as illegal aliens are trying to get into the U.S. before the border wall is constructed and to take advantage of the booming economy. Stephen Kopitz, president of the Princeton Policy Advisors, said, quote, "We forecast total apprehensions and inadmissible across the southwest U.S. border at 590,000. For 2018. This would be the second highest year since 2010. Kopitz predicts a capture rate of about 50%, so total illegal border crossings will be around 1.06 to 1.46 million this year.
So yeah, that just tells you exactly why you need to build a border wall, because when you're getting 1.5 million possible people crossing it, you can only catch about half of that. So we need to build the wall. We need to build it fast. We need to build it very, very large and tall.
Yeah. When Trump came into office, we saw border crossings go down a ton.
Because people were scared to come into the country. Now they're not so scared because of rulings such as, circuit court decisions against things.
Or
California being a
setting up a
sanctuary
state status, yeah. And Illinois also at this point. Mm-hmm. But, yeah, so during the first couple of months of the Trump administration, we saw border crossings at decades low, and it was great. But now those numbers are going away, and if we don't get the border wall up this year, the numbers are going to end up being pretty bad. Mm-hmm. So it's time to get work on this
And
stuff.
I will say one thing, that 70% figure seems really bad, but considering that last year did see such a sharp decline in the number, simply going back to regular levels can make it seem like it's a very large increase, like 70%. Even though it might be returning to place, slightly higher levels than it was previously, but, still relatively in line with what it used to be. Just wanted to point that out.
Yeah. Let's go into the next story I have here, though, and that is some illegal aliens have been charged in voting in the 2016 election. A little foreign election interference. Mm-hmm. I wonder if they were Russians. Let's see. 3 illegal aliens in Illinois have been indicted on felony charges for voting in the 2016 election. The clerk's office of Lake County, north of Chicago, discovered the crimes and charged the 3 illegal aliens with perjury for misrepresenting their citizenship. 2 other local residents have been charged with voting twice. Marcelo Villaruz, his wife Gina Villaruz, and Yvette Yurst were charged with 3 felonies which carry a sentence of up to 5 years in prison. Now, those names don't strike me as very Russian.
No, they don't.
Sound more Hispanic. But, there's no need to worry about these people voting in the election, especially in Illinois now that they have those new voter cards in Chicago for them.
Specifically designed to help illegal aliens register to vote. That's the entire point of that.
But, we always say they complain about Russian interference in the election. It doesn't specify what their nationality is, but presumably it's Mexican. Hispanic of some sort.
Villaruz is not
a Russian name.
Surname.
It's not whatsoever. So, we have more problems as far as foreign interference is concerned than just Russia.
Mm-hmm.
Let's move on now to the next story.
This one's kind of long if you want me to read it.
Sure.
So, a DACA recipient has killed a store owner in an armed robbery. An illegal alien that is part of the DACA program is accused of murdering a convenience store owner in Houston, Texas back in January. He got into a fight with another man and fled to his vehicle, where he reportedly pulled a gun and shot the man he was fighting with. When the store owner's son, Rahman Rupani, responded to the shooting, he shot him as well. Rupani later died from his wounds. The killer, Judas DeLuna, remains a fugitive at this time. DeLuna, 21, obtained his DACA protection despite a history of felony arrests and convictions. Court records show that DeLuna received a felony conviction for a terroristic threat made in 2015. He was sentenced to 60 days in jail. He had also previously been charged with aggravated assault with a deadly weapon, but that case was dismissed as part of a plea agreement. Earlier that year, however, which means earlier in 2015, DeLuna was charged with evading arrest with a motor vehicle. DeLuna's illegal alien father, Manuel, is also a violent felon who is currently facing deportation proceedings. DeLuna's older brother, Eric, was also convicted in 2005 of aggravated assault with the deadly weapon and in 2011 of aggravated assault with the deadly weapon again. Eric planned to ambush a Los Zetas cartel drug shipment in Houston, which was part of a sting operation, when a gun battle ensued. A federal informant died in the shootout, and a Harris County deputy was wounded. Eric DeLuna received a 30-year prison sentence. So, not sending their best, are they? And crime seems to run in that family.
No, not sending their best whatsoever. And, when you talk about DACA, because, that's the big thing about the story. This guy was a DACA recipient. This is someone here because of unconstitutional amnesties given by President Obama. They always say, we vet these people. We make sure that they have no histories of crime or whatever. These are the best of the best. These are all just valedictorians. Why are you so mad that they're here? You look at the acceptance rate for DACA under the Obama administration, especially towards the end. They would have acceptance rates of more than 95%. Almost every single thing that you sent them, they would just accept whatsoever.
Mm-hmm.
Including, this guy, this little killer guy, who shouldn't have been allowed in this country to begin with. He should be deported. And someone's dead because, we had to have DACA. And, there's going to be no protest for this person.
Of course not. No, nothing.
There's also a law enforcement individual that has died because of this. Is there going to be any protests for these people? No. The only people that need protests are illegal aliens, foreign nationals. Which, again, foreign nationals petitioning our government to benefit them? It's so crazy.
It is. But, we also have another story, and actually two more stories, both of which coming out of California. I've got one, and you've got the other. But the first one shows that just why California continues to be the state that it is. And that is, California has appointed an illegal alien to a statewide post. California has its first illegal alien in state office after Elizabeth Mateo was appointed to the California Student Opportunity and Access Program Project Grant Advisory Committee. Ain't that a mouthful there. But Mateo, an attorney, was born in Mexico and came to the U.S. illegally with her illegal alien parents when she was 14. Mateo had claimed that illegal aliens are not adequately represented in state government and described her appointment as a step towards correcting that alleged justice. She said, quote, "While undocumented students have become more visible in our state, they remain underrepresented in places where decisions that affect them are being made." A Facebook post of hers from when she graduated from Santa Clara University School of Law in 2016 has Mateo declaring in Spanish, quote, "Everything is dedicated to Oaxaca, Mexico, to the land that I miss so much." The corresponding picture shows her wearing her graduation cap and gown while her family holds up a Mexican flag. State Representative Kevin De Leon, who was running against Senator Dianne Feinstein, described Mateo as a, quote, "courageous, determined, and intelligent young woman who at great personal risk has dedicated herself to fight for those seeking their rightful place in our country."
Rightful place in our country.
Their rightful place in our country.
Foreign nationals' rightful place in this country is over you, in government positions over citizens.
Mm-hmm.
According to these people. And it's crazy, she's part of this California Students Opportunity and Access Program project.
Grant Advisory Committee.
Yeah, Grant Advisory Committee. Quite a mouthful of words. But what does this all mean? It means that she's going to be in charge of giving scholarship money to people. And, I've read other statements from this individual as well, and she says we need to get it to underrepresented communities. What was one underrepresented community she talked about in our little quote here?
Undocumented
immigrants.
Quote, unquote.
Oh, wow. Illegal aliens get into the government, and they use the government to benefit illegal aliens. Oh, my God, this is crazy. This is not something that we should expect from a government that's serious, but I mean, this is what they do in California. Let foreigners run the things, and benefit foreigners.
But you know what?
But this isn't foreign influence.
No, of course not. Not in any way, shape, or form.
No. As she says, everything is dedicated to Oaxaca, Mexico. Mm-hmm. Standing with her Mexican flag.
With her illegal alien family.
This is good for America.
The way I see it, an American could have had her position at that school of law, and an American could now be an attorney when she could be back in Oaxaca, Mexico.
American could be in that position. American's supposed to be in that position. She's complaining about how there's not enough undocumented immigrants in the U.S. government. That's the way it's supposed to be.
Yeah, exactly.
We want people with a commitment to this country, which is people that were born here, not people that say everything is dedicated to Oaxaca, Mexico. It's insane. But let's go on to the last story for immigration.
Yeah, I was going to say, at least there is some good news coming out of the state of California.
A California town is voting to end their sanctuary city status. The city of Los Amelitos, California, which is in Southern California, is taking a stand against a state law that limits the cooperation between local police and federal immigration agents and encourages sanctuary cities to exist. Los Alamitos will vote on an ordinance that would exempt it from sanctuary city law that city council members say conflicts with federal law. The city, quote, finds that it is impossible to honor our oath to support and defend the Constitution of the United States, according to the ordinance.
So that's some good news. At least there is one state or one city in that state that is standing up to the state and willing to actually follow the law as written. So I hope them the best, and I also hope that in the future, after you do this, if you do this, that California does not punish you, because we know that they will.
Yeah. I would like to see whether or not the city will be punished for going against the state by supporting what the federal government, says. Which, they bring up having the oath to the Constitution. We have a thing called the Supremacy Clause, which, gives the federal government supremacy over the states. And one of those instances which we've seen in the past through, I don't know the exact name of the bill, but the Arizona immigration bill they tried to set individually.
Back in 2010.
Yeah, that was shot down.
And
we've already had demonstrated precedent that states can't set up their own immigration laws.
Exactly.
So, now we're in a weird area to where a single city in California is dissenting from the state. To where, from the line of dissenting from the United States. It's quite a lot. I would have never imagined this would have been happening when we started the show, I'd like to say.
No, I can see it happening. Especially...
I didn't think that it was going to get to this point, though, where states divorce themselves from the United States, and now cities within that state are divorcing themselves from that state.
You have to look at the big picture, what's happening here. The state of California is essentially dedicating everything it has to being the quote-unquote resist capital of the country. Everything they do is to try and be opposite of whatever Trump is doing. They're intentionally going out of their way to break federal law, set up their own laws, and saying, you can't enforce your federal law inside our state. Okay, the last time that happened was in 61, 60? Oh my God, I forgot the year. It was this little thing called South Carolina, and that ended up triggering its freaking civil war. So, hopefully the United States wins the civil war against California. And I guess, Illinois too, since they're going to be a sanctuary state as well. I still haven't figured out why we haven't just declared California as occupied territory going and sending the feds. But, I can't have everything you want, can we?
Yeah.
Before we move on, would you like another piece of cake, Enzo? Because you never took the first one. Would you like this one?
No.
I'm on my third piece.
I don't want to eat while I'm doing this. I gotta focus.
I know, right? So I guess we can continue on to some elections news.
Yeah. So we didn't give last week on the show the run-up on this Pennsylvania election. Mm-hmm. What was the district? The 18th district. But there was on Tuesday a special election for the 18th congressional district in Pennsylvania between Connor Lamb and Rick Saccone. And Rick Saccone, who was the incumbent, lost extremely closely to Connor Lamb.
Well, they still have not officially declared a winner, okay?
Yeah.
Because there are a lot of, what we're going to read here tells it, but technically that's not true. They still have not officially declared a winner. But go on.
But yeah, the results came out with the precincts, Connor Lamb 49.8%, Rick Saccone 49.6%, and then there's the Libertarian Drew Miller, who came in with 0.6%.
Yet another Libertarian screwing Republicans over.
Yeah, so the difference between Connor Lamb and Rick Saccone is less than 1,000 votes, less than 600 votes, actually. And Drew Miller, the Libertarian, coming in with 1,379 votes. If those people would have just voted for Saccone, he would have won. Mm-hmm. And Libertarians relish this idea that they're an upsetter in these elections.
Exactly.
Because it really is sad that that's what they see their candidacy as.
And what's unfortunate is so many of them don't understand what they're... I think a lot of them do understand what they're doing, but when it comes to the policies of a Democrat versus the policies of a Republican policies are a lot closer to libertarian policies. They're not exact, obviously, and there are some Democrat policies that are closer, but for the most part, Republican policies are a lot closer to libertarian ideology than Democrats do. So when you have a close race like this, for a fact that that libertarian candidate is not going to win that election. But you also know that it being such a close election, if you're not voting for the Republican candidate, that decreases their likelihood of winning, increasing the likelihood of a Democrat winning. If Connor Lamb ends up actually winning this thing, which it is still possible that he could, and likely at this point that he could, yeah, Libertarians did play spoiler. And what did they do? Instead of getting what they wanted through a Libertarian or something close to what they wanted through a Republican, they ended up getting the exact opposite. Someone who is going to take away their rights, someone who is going to vote party line Democrat the entire time, someone who is going to resist the Trump administration, even as, Connor Lamb tried to be the more, the Trump-style Democrat. Whereas Rick Saccone was just your basic average, Republican. Of course, the Trump person was going to win. All the problem is that, that's not going to last once he gets into Congress. Once he gets into Congress, he's going to vote with the Democrats the entire time.
Well, I don't actually agree with that because in terms of Connor Lamb, the candidate, he is more appealing than Rick Saccone. Rick Saccone had no charisma to him whatsoever. But Connor Lamb, has a good rating with the NRA. He supports gun rights.
Well, a lot of Democrats support gun rights.
Yeah, and he is also pro-life himself.
But if the Democrats get control of the House during these upcoming midterms, the first thing they're going to do is impeachment vote.
Yeah.
And you know damn well he's going to vote for impeachment like every other fucking Democrat is going to do.
Yeah. And that's where, the risk comes. But, in terms of what this election actually means, it's hard to say. I mean, this was a district that Trump won by, what, like 20 points or something?
Trump won it by 20 points, which, it's interesting because what did the Democrats do? They treated this like it was the most important election in the world, as they have been for every special election.
Yeah.
Whereas the Republicans just kind of fumble along and we kind of mentioned this last week when we were talking about how you just finished the Texas Senate race.
I could have went to this race personally. I could have been paid to go work for Saccone.
That district up there has when do you think is the last time that they've seen a competitive race? A long time. They're not used to having national focus on them.
Yeah.
As all these other races are doing. So when all of a sudden they're thrust into the spotlight and there's millions and millions and millions of dollars coming in from, all over the country in support of, I guess, you could say both candidates, of course things are going to get competitive, and of course it's going to be close. And when you have a Democrat like Connor Lamb, who's, running more so on Trump's policy in a district that Trump got the vote in by a large margin, of course he's probably going to do better than the Republican who's just kind of like, hi, I'm your average Republican candidate, yay, vote for me. Even though, if you looked on paper, Connor Lamb's policies are probably more so in line with Trump's policies.
And he's also never criticized Donald Trump either.
Right.
The only person he's really gone against is Nancy Pelosi. And this is why, running as this moderate Democrat is actually very popular. And when you have places where, the incumbent Republican isn't very,
charismatic, enthusiastic,
well-liked. When you have this enthusiasm gap, places that we should be winning easily, we just haven't been.
Which is why if you look at, like, the Alabama race, Doug Jones was more of like a moderate centrist type Democrat than any other Democrat that you have seen running in a place like that. So it's very interesting looking at the results of these races that these more like moderate center left Democrats running against these like cucky, stupid, slothy Republicans that are running.
Now on immigration,
they send in all this money and yet it's a tie essentially. I mean, you look at the Doug Jones win and you look at Connor Lamb's, probably going to win. They spend all this money, and it just ties it. And that's why, we haven't actually read this slide here yet, but a lot of people are talking about the fact that because it's so close, it might trigger some recounts. There's still a lot of mail-in ballots that have yet to come in, and in that district, the mail-in ballots tend to be favoring Republicans a lot more, so that's why it's possible that 600-vote margin could actually be made up. And there's even talk of voter fraud. I mean, a lot of people are saying there's voter fraud in this election. I'm absolutely certain that there's voter fraud in every special election that happens, especially when, a Democrat wins in an upset in a hugely Republican area by just a tiny little margin of votes. Yeah, of course that's going to be voter fraud that lifts them over the top. That's how Doug Jones won, and that's probably how Connor Lamb's going to win as well. You can quote me on that.
Yeah, but going into something that happened here in Pennsylvania that was interesting is that Paul Ryan's PAC actually supported Connor Lamb over Rick Saccone. The Congressional Leadership Fund, a GOP PAC led by Paul Ryan, spent thousands of dollars in direct mail campaign to convince voters that Connor Lamb was a conservative who could protect gun rights. The special election between Democrat Connor Lamb and Republican Rick Saccone for the Pennsylvania 18th District has still not technically been called and certified, but Connor Lamb still leads by a small margin of votes as talks of a recount. Mail-in ballots come in late and possible voter fraud begin to surface. If Lamb holds on to the win, you can blame Paul Ryan for giving the Democrats a House seat. Now, one thing that we need to keep in mind, though, is with the upcoming midterms in November, Pennsylvania has been ordered through their Supreme Court to redistrict. And the district that they just competed over is being dissolved.
Yeah.
So Connor Lamb is going to hold this seat until the upcoming November election. And he is going to be in a district that is essentially all the districts that went, or all of the areas that went for him. And then they're creating another district of all the places that pretty much went for Saccone, and that's
Yeah.
going to be another congressional district. So you could still have a case in November where Lamb has his district and Saccone has another. Or maybe, Lamb loses this district in November and he was only there for a couple months. Who knows? But for the foreseeable future, Lamb is going to be the congressman there.
And also, there's one other thing that people need to remember about this district is, even though Trump won that district by 20 points, if you look at party registration numbers of people in that district, Democrats actually have a 50,000 margin over Republicans in terms of the number of people that are registered for their party in that district, even though Trump did very well. So it's not like it's not as big of a surprise, shocking, upset loss as people think it is for Rick Saccone. And one of the other things I did want to mention is, as we've seen, you've got these moderate type Democrats that try to, play themselves as being, to the right on some issues, and then they end up beating these Republicans that aren't even trying. That record there has shown that actually has some success to it. Problem is, the Democrats are not going to be able to do that nationwide for every single House race, especially through these primaries that are going to try to drive the Democratic Party even further to the left, which is what we've been saying on this show, is that when you're essentially, abdicating the middle, and the Republicans are the ones who are, reaching out to the middle. People who are independents support Republican policies right now over Democrat policies. But when you have these special elections, when it's essentially whoever the candidate ends up being, it's no surprise that, the results are all over the place and that Democrats are beating Republicans in Republican places. It's no surprise at all, especially, as we said, when all this money and stuff comes in from out of state. That's not indicative of any sort of blue wave, but what it does actually indicate is that if Democrats want to win, they can't drive themselves as far to the left as they've been doing. They need to go back to the Democrat Party of old. They need to go back to the Democrat Party of like the 1990s, I hate to say it. If you did that, they'd probably win a lot more things. But, who knows how that's actually going to happen.
And one of the weird things in this race that wasn't really made point of was Lamb's immigration stance.
Yeah.
Lamb is just as left-wing as, all of the rest of Congress. Okay, he wants amnesty just as much as the next Democrat. But they never pushed him on this aspect. And when the media is friendly to you, he's not going to be, pushed on this issue. There was an instance I remember where I believe, a reporter tried to get him on his immigration stance, and he just ran away. Mm-hmm. But, Saccone didn't make his race against about immigration whatsoever. He didn't point out that Lamb had this big, hole in the policies he was putting out that wouldn't appeal to the Pennsylvania voters. But, he just made it about, I got to get these tax cuts. Mm-hmm. I think so many of the Republicans thought that if we can just get these tax cuts done, then we're just safe in these elections. Won't that be enough? But that wasn't enough. So, I don't know.
Republicans need to make immigration the number one issue for the midterms. If they do that and they push hard on it, they will win. It almost is as simple as that.
It's gotten to the point where immigration is the only game almost that you need to focus on as far as politics is concerned. I mean, it's almost everything at this point. It's the reason why Donald Trump is the president and not Jeb Bush. It's immigration. It's what people care about. So, I could say more about this race, but let's just go on.
The next story that we have up is out of Nevada, and this is one of those stories that we've been following, the Nevada Senate race, and we have a little update on it. So Republican Danny Tarkanian said Friday that he will drop out of his primary challenge to Nevada Senator Dean Heller and instead run for the House seat in Nevada's 3rd Congressional District. President Trump had tweeted earlier Friday, quote, "It would be great for the Republican Party of Nevada and its unity if good guy Danny Tarkanian would run for Congress and Dean Heller, who is doing a really good job, could run for Senate unopposed." Heller has moved closer to Trump since the inauguration, backing tax reform and Trump's hardline immigration policies. However, Heller is still considered the most vulnerable Senate Republican running for re-election, and clearing a path for him in his primary will save him needed money and energy for the general election. Tarkanian dropped out of the race just hours before the filing deadline for Nevada's June 12th primary. Tarkanian was defeated by Jackie Rosen for the 3rd District seat in 2016 by a little over a 1% margin. The district, which is south of Las Vegas, has a CPVI of R+2 and was previously held by a Republican before 2016. Rosen is vacating his seat because he is running for the Democrat primary, hoping to face Heller in the general election in November. So, we've been following this race for a long time. We support Danny Tarkanian over Dean Heller, but it actually probably is good that he dropped out because, as they said, not only has Dean Heller gotten a lot better than he was before. I wasn't the biggest fan of him before, but he has gotten better. He has supported Trump's policies, especially his immigration policies, which I do want to see implemented, so that is a good thing there. But other than that, it does save him a lot of money, especially having to not worry about someone running in the Republican primary against him, which means that he is in a lot better position when it comes to the general election in November. And Danny Tarkanian has all the support that he still currently had, especially in that district. He should be able to do pretty well, I think, in the Republican primary. I know there's a few other people that are running in that Republican primary as well, but that is a House seat that should have been a Republican seat. It's an R+2, and if Danny Tarkanian goes in, I think he has a really good shot of actually winning that thing. In
the House
November
is where we have danger. It's
right.
Not the Senate.
So,
and Dean Heller isn't, as you said, a very egregious Republican towards what we want done. You look at his 538 score. On there, they track how much, members of Congress support or oppose Donald Trump. His Trump score is 91 at the moment.
Which is, it's decent.
It's one of the better, Republican senators even around. So I don't want to see him lose his seat. For a while we wanted Tarkanian, but, things change.
But, we're still going to support Danny Tarkanian. And as we said, the House is where things are at. So this is actually an opportunity for us to flip a House seat that is blue to the red column. And so people are forgetting that the Democrats need to flip how many Republican seats in order to win. If we can even flip just one of theirs, that hurts their chances by even one seat. That means a lot.
I believe the number is 16 they need. I might be wrong on that.
Something like that. But either way.
But that's not too many House seats. It's doable. That's why we need to really work hard on these House of Representative seats.
Yeah, and also, Danny Tarkanian is extremely supportive of Trump. And Trump is extremely supportive of Danny Tarkanian as well. So, that's one of those things where having that support does go a long way, as we've seen in past elections and stuff like that.
Let's move on now to the stuff we have for the bottom of the stack, though, for national news. I'll start it off. Former Obama officials have formed a new group to undermine the government. 50 former Obama administration officials have formed a new think tank called National Security Action, whose sole purpose is to, quote, oppose the reckless policies of the Trump administration that endanger our national security and undermine U.S. strength in the world. They will no doubt... No doubt. Yeah, I said that wrong. They will no doubt work hand in hand with the D-state bureaucrats and lobbyists to undermine President Trump's agenda for their own political agendas.
I wish I would know who those people were, because that would shed a lot of light as to exactly what their spin on thing is and what they're exactly going to advocate for. But this just shows you that, these people that worked for the government before, it's not like when the change of power happens, they just stop working. No, they continue to try to push for what they want, just in different ways. And by forming a think tank that's probably going to have a lot of support on the Hill, they're going to be able to influence a lot of our politicians and other people that work in the federal government to do whatever they want to have done, which in a lot of times is not exactly what Trump wants to have done, what Republicans want to have done, or what, rational thinkers actually want to have done.
Yeah, most definitely. Let's move on now to the stuff with Vanessa Trump.
So, Vanessa Trump has filed for divorce from her husband, Donald Trump Jr., on Thursday in New York City. She filed an uncontested proceeding in the Manhattan Supreme Court, meaning she does not expect a legal battle over custody of their 5 children or any assets. The couple released a statement saying, quote, "After 12 years of marriage, we have decided to go our separate ways. We will always have tremendous respect for each other and our families. We have 5 beautiful children together, and they remain our top priority. We ask for your privacy during this time." So, they haven't really given many reasons as to why Vanessa Trump has filed for a divorce, but a lot of people do point out the fact that, we're what, 2 weeks separated from when they received that white powder letter that, she got sent to the hospital as a precaution for that. And a lot of people said that their marriage had been rocky for a while leading up to this. So that tends, at least for me, I think that the white powder letter was a last straw.
Yeah,
and also,
possibly.
What we didn't mention here is that, Donald Trump Jr. has actually tried to get rid of his Secret Service detail. He did get rid of it at one point, but they gave it back to him, saying, like, you shouldn't get rid of this. But she actually has refused to have Secret Service details as well, essentially only going with whatever details put on her husband, because she's been trying to stay out of this as much as possible. It's very hard to do, so I do not blame her for wanting to get out of this. It's just very sad that it had to be this way. They still love each other, from what I've heard. They still have 5 kids. It's not like she's trying to steal all his money or make a big scene about it. She's just quietly saying, you know what, I don't really want to be part of this right now, so I'm going to leave. I'm not going to fight you over it. I'm not going to do anything like that. I just want out. So that appears to be how it is. And you know what? I think that what we should do is respect their privacy as they asked. And go to the next story. What do you think?
Yeah.
Unless you have anything to say about it.
No, I don't. Let's go on to our next 2 stories. Are both related to the national school walkout that happened this week. I believe that more than 2,000 different districts saw walkouts in their schools this week. So, thousands upon thousands of students have taken to the streets, I guess, to protest gun violence and how we need to have gun control. But the first story we're going into out of Minneapolis here, something more than just protesting happened.
Yeah, go ahead.
A student at a high school in Minneapolis was assaulted by a mob of students after he carried a pro-Trump flag during the national school walkout on Wednesday. Police say the student was waving the flag in support of President Trump when he was ambushed by at least 8 classmates. They took the Trump flag from him and damaged the camera he was carrying. He was taken to the hospital with a broken arm in 2 places. There have been no arrests as the investigation is ongoing.
So yeah, those peaceful demonstrations there of people wanting to protest gun violence. We don't have the article here, but there's that other story, those guys ripping down that American flag. I think that was in Memphis, or maybe Nashville.
And then there was the stories where, the kids in Chicago got out, and they went to that Walmart, and they just destroyed the place and stole things.
People used it as an opportunity to skip class.
Yeah.
That's what they did.
Or get up to shit they're not supposed to.
Yeah, and we have this other story here. I guess I'll go into it now, but to show you just how planned these things were. It's not like a lot of the... let me backtrack a little bit before I say this. If you look at a lot of those posters and stuff, students did not just bring those posters by themselves.
No.
These were teachers that have political motives, that handed out posters, that handed out markers, that encouraged their students to do this. And we have evidence because there's a student that was a high school student from Ohio that has actually been suspended for not participating in the walkout. Student Jacob Shoemaker, a senior at Hilliard Davidson High School in Hilliard, Illinois, was suspended from school for deciding not to participate in Wednesday's walkouts protesting gun violence. Students who did not want to participate were instructed to gather for a study hall, but Shoemaker felt that by joining students who didn't protest, he would be taken aside. Quote, student refused to follow instructions after being warned repeatedly by several administrators. Student not permitted on school property for 24 hours, the suspension slip from the school said.
He was suspended for not leaving the school.
Essentially what happened is, the teacher said, all right, kids, it's time to walk out of class. And he's like, I just kind of want to stay in class and do my work. I don't want to take a side by having to go to the study hall session. I also don't want to participate in this. I want to just be the student here at school. And so they suspended him for disobeying and doing that sort of stuff. And so, that alone actually is proof that... maybe not necessarily totally proof, but it is pretty good anecdotal evidence as to the political motives behind this thing through the teachers themselves.
Yeah. And, you look at these walkouts, these are not something that was solely, thought of by the students. Last week we were talking about the different donors, from MoveOn.org that have been involved with these kids. It was the Women's March themselves that organized this national walkout. I believe there's supposed to be another big national walkout thing in like a week or two or something.
I don't know. There probably
I heard
is.
something about the end of the month. But, yeah, the media is once again just, reporting on this artificially astroturf inflated movement, and when you look real closely at the fine details of what's going on, it's not good.
No, it's not. And like I said, I really don't like it when they do bring politics into high school, especially when high school teachers push their own narratives, which, they used to try to not do that. But any teacher who leads their students in this, who actively encourages them to partake in this, is injecting politics into the classroom in places that they should not be.
Yeah.
That being said, a lot of students didn't really carry the weight. They just want to use it as an excuse to get out of class, which frankly, I'd probably support them in that regard. Obviously not supporting them in the gun control regard at all, though. But
let's go on now to the last story before current your college craziness, though.
Yeah, this one's not actually popping up on my phone, so can you go ahead and read this story real quick?
Oh, okay. Yeah, this is the bridge story. Company behind FIU bridge collapse has history of fines and lawsuits. Two of the companies who built the Instant Bridge at Florida International University in Miami are having details emerge about past engineering failures and inspection fines, including a recent accusation that one of them had hired unskilled and careless workers. I guess just to recap on this week, there was a bridge in Miami at the Florida International University that they had built. It had been up for, 5 days?
5 days.
And it collapsed and crushed people underneath?
Yeah, what happened was they were conducting, from what I heard, is they were conducting some sort of test on it. I don't know why they didn't block off traffic when they were doing this, but they were conducting a test on it, and that's when the thing did collapse. There was 2 workers that were standing on the bridge. I think both of them did die, and also some of the people that were in the cars beneath the bridge, they just got crushed. And some of their bodies were just taken out, like yesterday, as they were trying to, very carefully clear the rubble to get to these people. I think so far it's been 6 confirmed deaths, I believe.
Yeah, we have 6 written down here. But
yeah.
I can continue.
Yeah, go ahead.
The bridge, which was inspected over a 6-hour period over the past weekend, was built as a joint construction project by MCM Construction, based out of Miami, and Fig Brig Design, based out of Tallahassee. The Virginia Department of Labor cited Fig for 4 violations in 2012 after a 90-ton slab of concrete fell from a bridge it was building near Norfolk. FIU is about building bridges and student safety. This project accomplishes our mission beautifully, school president Mark Rosenberg said in a statement Saturday that has since been taken off of the school's website. We're filled with pride and satisfaction at seeing this engineering feat come to life and connect our campus to the surrounding community where thousands of our students live. So, the reason why they are so filled with pride for the accomplishment of building this bridge, or, what Mark Rosenberg was happy about before this happened, was, you look at the company that built it, it was a female-run company of diverse women, mainly Indian. And, diversity, building bridges, in the end, didn't work out so well.
They always say diversity is our strength and we need to build bridges, not walls. Well,
diversity's strength is not building bridges.
Diversity of your company's management does not equal strength of the support beams on your bridges that you're building instead of the walls that you're building. Even though the walls that we're building on the border are the ones that are standing, and the bridges you're building are not. And there's 6 people that are dead because of it.
Yeah. So, this actually could have even been in current year college craziness.
Well, I put it last because it's kind of a segue in between.
Yeah. But, with that said, we can go into some current year college craziness. Current year college craziness segment of the show. We're talking about the crazy stuff that happens on college campuses here and abroad, but predominantly here, and I think this week only exclusively in the United States. Only here in the United States. We talk about the big crazy things happening on college campuses because, the inmates run the asylum at these schools.
That's a good way to put it, isn't it?
So the first thing that we want to go into is some studies done by Gallup that are a bit concerning.
Yeah, so a new poll shows that college Democrats favor diversity and inclusion over free speech rights. So a solid majority of U.S. college students say that diversity and inclusion should take precedence over free speech, with Democrats overwhelmingly favoring the protection of feelings over free speech and Republicans overwhelmingly favoring free speech over the protection of feelings. According to a new Gallup survey, 53% of college students favor a diverse and inclusive society over free speech rights. The breakdown is as follows. And the numbers I'm going to give you, the first number is people favoring diverse and inclusive society. The second number is those people favoring free speech rights. So men, 39 to 61, overwhelmingly favoring free speech rights. Women, 64-35, overwhelmingly supporting diversity and inclusion. Whites, 47-52, kind of, almost 50-50. Blacks, however, 68-31, favoring diversity and inclusion. However, when you single it out for blacks at historically black institutions, it drops to only 53-46. So that's very interesting that that's a lot closer. And then once you get into the actual party breakdown, Democrats support it 66-34, Independents support free speech 49-50, and Republicans support free speech 30 to 69. So overwhelming support for free speech by Republicans there.
Yeah.
And I want to look at that historically black institutions one. There's actually a really strong theory as to why that number is so much lower. It's because historically black institutions are still historically black. They have a lot less diversity than your average college campus does. So black students that would be going there wouldn't see the need to have diversity and inclusion be such an important factor,
depending on what
students at more diverse schools might actually think. So I can see why that number would be a lot closer for that specifically, but it really just goes to show you with all the other groups and whatever their numbers were.
Yeah, it really depends on what you define as diversity, because when I entered college, I thought diversity was just people with, broadly different experiences and different skills and whatnot. But then, as I went through college, I realized diversity just means non-white.
It's true.
So, at a historically black institution, technically you don't have a lot of diversity.
There isn't.
But, to the standard of which these people usually talk about diversity, it's a diverse.
Look at the new Black Panther movie that came out. 90% of the cast in that movie is diverse, or is black. And you know what the media said? There was one thing that said the cast of Black Panther is hella diverse. Yeah, 90% come from the same race. That's not diverse.
Yeah, you can just say it's hella non-white.
It's hella non-white.
But it's strange that these words work in exchange of each other at this point. But so I guess you would see at historically black institutions where they actually have exclusionary sort of institutions. You have people that don't really value inclusion, because if you were to diversify a historically black institution, that means you're just going to make it not a historically black institution going forward. You're just going to integrate it. So but yeah, I don't have anything else on that. You want to move on?
Yeah, let's move on.
So the next story we have is from Stanford, so Ivy League. Stanford shows contempt for white students and leaves up racist graffiti. A week ago, residents of Enchanted Broccoli Forest, which is a name of a residential co-op at Stanford, discovered the words "No crackers!" scrawled in paint across towards their, their bus hub. You would think that residents supposedly progressive and racially conscious house would jump to remove a racial epithet from house property. Not so. When a resident posted a picture, in the Enchanted Broccoli Forest GroupMe last Thursday, peers brushed aside the incident with off-color jokes. Residents repeatedly brushed aside one of the... Here, let me break down a second. In the link to the article, they actually have like the screenshot in the GroupMe, and there was one guy in there that was offended by the whole crackers thing. It's just like, oh, this is a racial epithet. But one of the ladies goes on to say in the GroupMe that the word cracker has been historically defined as to mean racist white person, and in that explanation she gives, she goes on to say at the end, "I hope we have no crackers here."
I have never heard the word cracker used to mean racist white person. I've always heard it mean just white person.
It mainly means like southern white, or
like
rural
redneck
white
types.
Yeah. It is an epithet, which is why I don't use words like, cracker or white trash or things of that sort. But, racial epithets against white people, reverse racism don't real, so it doesn't matter. At least that's what they say.
Reverse racism don't real?
Yeah.
This
is the arguments that they say,
Reverse racism don't real.
Reverse racism don't real.
Alrighty then.
As, the person defending the uses of the word cracker would likely say.
Right.
But, the school just decided to leave it up. Because, no crackers.
Nope.
Let's move on, though. The next story we have is from California. UC Merced College Republicans trigger their campus over an immigration event. Following a weekly University of California Merced College Republicans immigration event, students, community members, and even members of the college administration made their displeasure known, some even resorting to violent threats. Members of UCMCR on campus March 6, holding signs reading "Ice, Ice, Baby," and "I love undocumented firearms," along with the telephone number for U.S. Immigration and Enforcement, ICE. Public outcry to the event was almost instantaneous. Student protesters arrived on scene shortly after the event began, chanting "Immigration, not deportation," and carrying both a Mexican/LGBTQ combination flag and a transgender flag. According to the Merced Sun-Star, UCM Chancellor Dorothy Leland stated that the signs, quote, "disturbed many of us, violating the school's principles of community, and were, quote, clearly intended to create an unwelcome environment for our nearly 600 undocumented students."
So she have nearly 600 undocumented, quote-unquote, students at UC Merced. Sounds like they do need to send to me.
Yeah.
That's 600 college admission spots that could be going to some good old Americans, not some illegal aliens that are, stealing our positions here.
The funny thing is, just like, what they're calling for is the censorship of American citizens.
Precisely.
Get rid of these kids' free speech because there's non-citizens here that aren't supposed to be here, but we tell them that they're supposed to, I guess. But insinuating that they have to leave, that's hate speech. Time to get rid of that. Funny how that works.
Yeah, I think it's hilarious the fact that she even admitted to that. So, what are you going to do?
Yeah. 600, though. That's quite a number.
Mm-hmm.
Let's go on to the last story. This is actually something I've wanted to talk about for a while on the show. Chinese influence. And
Eric Burkhart was
he knows quite a lot on that.
We should have him back on if you want to talk about that sometime.
Yeah. But I added this story here at the end of Current College Craziness just to talk about Chinese influences in colleges. Senate Majority Whip John Cornyn, a Republican from Texas, believes that a recently introduced bill will play a key role in eliminating Chinese government infiltration of U.S. colleges and universities. According to the Texas lawmaker, the Foreign Investment Risk Review Modernization Act, a bill that was introduced in November of last year, is, quote, an important piece of our overall response to the threat posed by Chinese-funded Confucius Institutes. Quote, recently there has been calls to investigate China's involvement in American college campuses through the so-called Confucius Institutes, the legislator explained on the Senate floor. Quote, these institutes are proxies for the Chinese Communist Party. They offer schools financial benefits in exchange to set up shop in close proximity to U.S. researchers and students whose views they attempt to influence for what are essentially manipulative propaganda campaigns, ones that conveniently whitewash over the communist regime's less flattering attributes and their troubling history of human rights abuses and belligerence in places like the South China Sea. If voted into law, the legislation mentioned by Cornyn will, quote, modernize and strengthen the Committee on Foreign Investment in the U.S., allowing it to more effectively guard against the risks to national security of the United States posed by certain types of foreign investment and other purposes. So yeah, read all that out just to let you know that the Chinese government is funding these so-called Confucius Institutes, which they, will do classes out of these Confucius Institutes. And this is funded by the Chinese Communist Party under the leadership of the Chinese Communist Party to do whatever they want to do in the United States. I don't think people realize just the amount of antagonistic viewpoint the United States has is in Chinese society. They orient themselves in a way to undermine us. And, it's not something you really have to consider towards a lot of nations, but China is one where when we let them come here, this has been discovered, this has been confirmed, they come here with subversive aims. I don't know if you have anything to add on to this stuff, but...
No, I got nothing else to add there.
Yeah, it's all good. But with that said, let's go into some international news. We just got a couple stories left, and we'll close out the show. First off, we'll start off in Europe. Hungary repatriates all of its gold from London. The National Bank of Hungary is bringing back the country's 100,000 ounces of gold from London, citing fears over a coming geopolitical crisis. The total value of the 3 tons of gold amounts to 33 billion Hungarian forint, or around $130 million. According to Hungary's central bank, the move was motivated by concerns over future geopolitical crises and the fact that storing gold outside the country is increasingly being seen as too risky. Quote, gold is not merely an investment product for central banks, but is a strategic tool that is conducive to confidence in the country, both abroad and domestically, the bank said in a press release, adding, quote, the time has come to bring home the gold reserves of the country.
I wonder what they mean by geopolitical crisis. I think we know exactly what that means.
It has to do with the European Union and its policies on migration.
Exactly.
We've seen for months now the battles between Hungary and Poland and the Czech Republic and countries of those sorts. Austria is also involved, fighting against the EU's enforcement of migration because, as we've talked about in the show, I don't know, at least 100 times at this point, that
easily
migration into Europe from Africa and the Middle East has been a net negative. And as we see, trust in the EU eroding and these governments' abilities to control their own states eroding, Hungary doesn't think it's safe to keep gold in London because they think a geopolitical crisis is coming soon. And, with the separating lines in Europe between East and West now we're seeing over, support for the European Union, it's not going to end well.
No, it's not. For either side, I should say.
Yeah. Let's move on now to another story that happened this week, and this is the stuff that's happened between Russia and the United Kingdom. Have you seen any of this stuff, Bobby?
I have. It's not something I've been, following directly, but I've seen people talking about it.
Yeah. Well, let me read a little piece on it. Russia is set to expel Russian diplomats in retaliation for Prime Minister Theresa May's decision to kick out 23 Russians in relation with London crashed to a post-Cold War low over an attack with military-grade nerve agents on English soil. This was in Salisbury, United Kingdom. After the first known offensive use of such a weapon in Europe since World War II, May blamed Moscow and gave 23 Russians who she said were spies working under diplomatic cover at the London embassy a week to leave. Russia has denied any involvement, cast Britain as a post-colonial power unsettled by Brexit, and even suggested London fabricated the attempt to whip up anti-Russian hysteria. Asked by a Reuters reporter in the Kazakh capital if Russia planned to expel British diplomats from Moscow, Russian Foreign Minister Sergei Lavrov smiled and said, quote, "We will, of course."
So, as much as they're trying to force a war with Russia between the United States and Russia, they're also trying to get other countries involved too, and that includes the United Kingdom, because, as much of an impact, I should say, as Brexit has had on the country, people are losing control of that country really, really fast. And that's why you're seeing a lot of those draconian laws that they're implementing, their hate speech laws, their anti-gun laws that they've had for a very, very long time. But at the same time, they still have the anti-Russian hysteria that they're trying to push there. They're trying to get their citizens to support war with Russia, just as they are here in the United States, only it's just much stronger here. But I don't know. I don't know why Russia would be using a military-grade nerve agents on English soil.
It doesn't make sense for them to do so.
They're just randomly saying, you know what, fuck it, let's just use some nerve agents and hurt or kill some people. That does not seem like something that Russia would want to do, unless it was either A, faked, which is possible, or B, someone just took matters into their own hands, which is also possible.
Yeah.
So, who knows?
So, I got a little thing here from Nikki Haley in response to this Russia stuff, where she says that potentially the Russians might attack New York City. Speaking at an emergency UN security session, Haley demanded, quote, immediate concrete measures against the Russians based on Britain blaming them for poisoning in Salisbury. She claimed they amounted to a chemical weapons attack, and UN credibility is at stake if a permanent council member can do that. Quote, time and time again, member states say to the use of chemical weapons under any circumstance. Now one member stands accused of using chemical weapons on the sovereign soil of another member. The credibility of this council will not survive if we fail to hold Russia accountable. Haley then suggested that the next Russian attack could be against New York City, and that any other city in any other UN security member nation was also a potential target for chemical weapons. Unspecified actions are taken against Russia. Quote, if we don't take immediate concrete measures to address this now, Salisbury will be the last place we see chemical weapons used. They could be used here in New York or in cities of any country that on this council. This is a defining moment. So, the Salisbury thing was in regards to the poisoning of, I believe it was like a former Russian spy or something.
From what I understand of the story, that's essentially what it was.
But, and we don't have any solid proof on what even really happened. But here we have Nikki Haley, our ambassador to the United Nations, just saying, we gotta attack Russia. Russia must be held to blame. We gotta do something. If we don't stop it, it could happen anywhere. and the hysteria never ends. I'm not a fan of Nikki Haley whatsoever.
No,
she hasn't been good for
all.
Trump whatsoever. And we don't want more stupid statements like this.
Nope.
Let's go on to the last thing that we have for Europe, and that is what's happening out in Telford with grooming gangs. A number of new sexual exploitation victims have contacted police in Telford following the claim that hundreds of girls may have been sexually abused by grooming gangs. It comes after Lucy, the Conservative MP for Telford, said that she had been inundated with reports from people saying, "This has happened to me." An investigation by the Sunday Mirror estimates up to 1,000 girls could have been sexually abused over the last 40 years. Since the 1980s, children as young as 11 are reported to have been victims of sexual predators who drugged, beat, and raped them. So this has been a huge thing that has exploded that the media has done a good job of burying. If you know anything about the Rotterdam grooming gangs, this is a very similar thing, except this is much bigger. And, Telford, I believe, let me look up the exact population again. It's not a very large city whatsoever. Telford has a population of 148,000.
Yeah, so
1,000 girls groomed from there?
Over the last 40 years.
Over the last 40 years. That's pretty sizable.
Yeah.
And the reason why these grooming gangs can get away with what they're doing is it's predominantly foreign men doing this. Mm-hmm. In the case of Rotterdam, it was almost exclusively Pakistani men. And as what they're finding in Telford, it's also almost exclusively Pakistani men. Or Muslim men, almost predominantly doing all of this. But, the authorities don't want to get called a racist by going and trying to stop these gangs from, trafficking British girls. Young girls. As young as 11, they say in these reports. And, these guys in these grooming gangs go along and threaten the families of these, children that they're grooming. Say, if you say anything about this, we'll kill your family. So, these girls just end up having lives where they're stuck in this shit for, years, being trafficked in prostitution. And, there's instances, Telford isn't the only place in the United Kingdom where there's, new news about this happening. All across the whole of the United Kingdom, they're finding more and more instances of these grooming gangs. And the political apparatus doesn't go against these people because they're an oppressed class. They're Muslims, Pointing this out will only, instill more Islamophobia in society, and we need to approach this situation with tolerance. This is what they try and do.
And you know what? In a way, I would say that the fact that there isn't a Second Amendment in the United Kingdom has gone a long way to ensure that things like this happen. Because I'll tell you one thing, and anyone listening can take this as a future threat if they want. If anyone finds out that someone has touched their daughter, has raped their daughter, they're going to be mad, and they're going to want revenge. Here in the United States, you can get away with that. And you know exactly what I mean by saying that. It goes click, click, bang, bang. Okay? And I'll even say that. If my daughter ever gets raped, I'm going to hunt that motherfucker down and shoot him right in the fucking face. I'll shoot him 100 times. I'll shoot him in his dick, too. Just so that, in case he somehow is able to survive. And that is you can take that. But you know what? At the same time, it isn't. Because I'm 100% justified in doing so. And all these fathers who are being threatened by these Muslim grooming gangs are all saying, this has happened to my children, but I can't do anything about it. The police won't do anything about it. I can't do anything about it. I'm being called racist myself. The police aren't going to do it because they don't want to be called racist. And so this shit perpetuates over and over and over again. I'm just saying, if they had a Second Amendment, this wouldn't be a problem because they would have dealt with that a long time ago, rightfully so.
Let's move on to the last area of international news we got for this week, which we got two stories out of Australia. I'll cover the first one. Australia considers fast-tracking visas for white South African farmers.
Good.
White South African farmers, quote, deserve special attention from Australia due to the, quote, horrific circumstances of land and violence, Peter Dunn has said. The Home Affairs Minister told the Daily Telegraph on Wednesday his department was examining a range of methods to fast-track their path to Australia on humanitarian or other visa programs. South Africa's new president, Cyril Ramaphosa, is pursuing legal changes to allow appropriation of farmlands without compensation for redistribution to black South Africans. The policy has led to reports, including in the Australian media, that white farmers are being murdered at rates of more than one per week. Quote, if you look at the footage and read the stories, you hear the accounts, it's a horrific circumstance they face, Dunn said. So yeah, you know, was it last week when the appropriations... Yeah, it was last week when the South African Congress voted their motion to amend the Constitution.
Mm-hmm.
Hard to believe it's only a week ago. But,
I think it might have been 2 weeks ago, actually. Yeah, it was 2 weeks ago, actually.
It was 2 weeks ago. Yeah, when they first moved on it. Yeah, I was thinking a week was too short. But, you know, we've always been very knowledgeable on what's happening with white South Africans. You know, we have many friends that are white South Africans. We've talked to people. We've done interviews. You can look back through what we've done in the show. And, you know, Australia has a history of taking, you know, white people from Africa when they, you know, in these post-colonial states. In the case of Rhodesia,
mm-hmm.
when Rhodesia was going through similar circumstances, they allowed certain visas to let, you know, white Rhodesians come over to Australia. So they're doing a similar thing. Hopefully here they can get the people that are in danger out of South Africa. And, I mean, you know, they speak the same language. They both speak English in Australia. It's a similar culture. They're both former subjects of the British Crown.
And I will also say there is a whitehouse.gov petition right now for the U.S. to accept white South African refugees. I'm not sure what the exact number is, but I encourage everybody to go out and vote and sign that thing. I'm going to put a link to it in the description of this episode. So please, please, please sign that. Get that going. By law, when whitehouse.gov petitions reach the required signature amount in the amount of time that, you know, they give to do it, by law, the government at least has to respond to it. Now, sometimes they can say no, but they have to at least respond to it. So that is one of the best ways that we can get our own government to at least, you know, bring up the topic for debate. So I suggest everyone go out and do that.
Yeah. So this is a good thing. The South African government isn't happy about this whatsoever because, you know, they just want to take the land and not let the people run away and tell the world about the terrible things that they're doing there. But, I don't think that's something that we have to put up with. So let's move on now to our last story for the week. You got this, Bobby?
Yeah, so this is also a story out of Australia. And, you know, it seems as they want to do a very good thing by taking in the white South African refugees, just like us, they have a lot of incompetence in government. And I'll say why here. The government of New South Wales has an embarrassing problem with its $2 billion worth of new trains. They're too wide to fit in their tunnels. Current trains are 2.9 meters wide, while the new models being built in South Korea are 20 centimeters wider, which means that the new trains could collide with the tunnel walls on their way up the world-famous Blue Mountains. The government has decided to simply relax current safety standards and partially modify 10 tunnels to allow the new trains to run. Quote, "It takes a special type of incompetence to buy trains that don't fit through the tunnels," said Luke Foley, a state opposition leader. I wanted to put this in there because, you know, we talk a lot about how incompetent the government is in wasting things. Australia is just the same way as everybody else.
Yeah.
Wasting $2 billion on trains that don't even fit in their tunnels. And now they want to, what's that say? Relax current safety standards in order for the trains to fit?
That sounds great.
Relaxing safety standards is what happened at Florida International University for a little bridge that they were constructing there, and we saw how that turned out. So you know what, Australia, you think that's a good idea, go for it. It's totally going to work out in your favor.
Yeah. But yeah, with that said, that's the show for the week.
Yeah.
It's the 1 year anniversary of doing the podcast. I didn't think a year back when we'd start we would be where we are now, you know, with cameras and nice mics and a solid format and all this experience. But it's been a fun journey to get to this point. We've, you know, gained thousands of downloads. The feedback we've gotten from people, very solid stuff, and we're going to continue to do what we do and produce good content for y'all to listen to.
And remember, you know, if you're a listener to this, you can find us on YouTube, you can find us on PewTube, you can find us on Gab.ai. All of those things are...
Facebook.
And on Facebook, yeah. Our Facebook page is almost at 200 likes, believe it or not.
Yeah.
It's growing pretty fast there. So, you know, we've got plenty of platforms we're on. And also, if you do want to support the show, we do have a Patreon account. That is the best way to support us through that. And, you know, I have to completely agree with you. It's been a fantastic last year. As you said, we've never missed a show. There have been some times where we've had to do it over Skype. We haven't always been able to do it in person. One time you even had to do it by yourself. But one thing that we are looking forward to is another year. And I hope that this time next year we'll have another cake, same happy anniversary, #MAGA, with the 2 candle on top of it.
Yeah.
So that's one thing that I personally will be looking forward to. But you know what? For everybody listening to this, we couldn't do it without you. So thank you very much here on this 1-year anniversary.
Yeah, most definitely thank you. But with that said, thank you for listening to another episode of Trump Public Radio, and have a good one.
Goodbye, everybody.
Goodbye.